Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala khatamil anbiya. We have covered introductory part of ethics and particularly how Islam has provided certain universal and personal ethical guidance. Ethics essentially is a term used in a narrow sense, but the fact of the matter is it covers every single aspect of human life. Particularly when you want to make any decisions or judgments, may those be personal, economic, social, political, or even global, there is a direct and indirect involvement of ethics. Today's discussion is our Unit 5, and that relates with ethical dimensions of emotional intelligence, a concept which has been taken up by psychologists, clinicians particularly, who deal with clinical psychology and try to help people out in their emotional disturbance and problems. Ethical judgments are based on our standards of ethics and morality. Whatever is our standard of ethics and morality, that determines our judgments. Therefore, if you are driving on Murray Road or on Peshawar Road and you find a traffic jam, and then you see in the middle of the traffic there is an automobile which is giving smoke, and you find that either people are standing on both sides watching or just passing by. That means having seen something which is problematic, something problem there, but none of them uses ethical judgment. Ethical judgment will be that you stop and ask the person, how can I help you? Or go around and see if there is a shop where you can bring some water or sand to help the person. And the same happens when in a country you find poor citizens are butchered, oppressed, and no one raises voice in their defense. It's ethical judgment. Why countries of the world are silent, why neighboring countries are silent. So whether it's something very small or global, ethical judgments are based on your standards. If your standard is I-ness, selfishness, me everything, others have no existence, then you will have no concern and no care for people. But if your standard of morality and your basis of ethics is that you are a community of human beings with human feelings, with human care, then you will rush and help the person. In a rainy season, if someone driving a motorbike skids and has some problem, how many people do rush and help and how many just watch? All that is a matter of ethical judgment based on ethical standards and morality given to us by our parents, by society, and sometimes by social pressures. Local customs, social norms, as well as universal values play an important role in making judgments. So if you are born and raised in a society where everyone is selfish, then that becomes the norm. But if everyone in a home is helpful, then you grow as a helpful child, helpful youth. You think about others. Emotions too play an important role in making judgments. What we discussed till now is a matter of rational appeal. When you see something wrong happening, reason tells you to stop. If you find a girl and boy sitting very close on campus, whether it belongs to your faculty or you belong to other faculty, it makes no difference. It's your job when you see something to stop it. But how many stop it is a question mark. So emotions too play an important role in making judgments. Modern psychological findings show in some situations emotions prevail on making judgments, rational judgments. What are emotions? Normally we go for dictionary meaning, and Oxford and American dictionary, American usage, both refer to it and tell us that it's a matter of agitation or disturbance of mind, feeling, passion, any vehement or excited mental state. This is what Oxford tells us. Now Webster's New World Dictionary, which Americans use because they claim their English is different than Britishers, to agitate, to stir up strong feeling, excitement, the state of capability of having the feelings aroused to the point of awareness, any of various complex reactions with both mental and physical manifestations such as love, hate, fear and anger. So the dictionary meaning is any kind of arousal by emotions, not by rational or logical analysis. What are manifestations of emotions? A long list. One is anger, where you become furious, annoyed and sometimes hostile and may lead to hatred or violence. Sadness, that may lead to grief, sorrow, dejection, withdrawing from society, despair, depression. And unfortunately, depression has become a common factor in many of our societies in the world, and Pakistan is no exception, unfortunately. And that's essentially an imported phenomenon. Enjoyment, happiness, joy, bliss, delight, pleasure, ecstasy, euphoria. Love, which means acceptance, friendliness, trust, kindness, affinity, attachment, devotion, adoration. Or surprise, when you are shocked, in amazement or in wonder. Shame, when there is a feeling of guilt, embarrassment, remorse, humiliation, regret, why I did it, why I said it, I should not have done it. Or fear, anxiety, where you have apprehension, nervousness, misgiving. You are going to an interview and your hands are usually cold. You are on a podium giving a lecture and you are perspiring. All these are matter of emotions and anxiety and fear, and these things do exist. For quite some time, this book made top in 10 top well-read books in academic as well as educated circles. Daniel Goleman, a clinical psychologist, wrote a book, Emotional Intelligence, and that became a bestseller. We refer to him and just try to understand what he means by emotional intelligence. So what is said here is not what I think, but what Daniel Goleman refers, and we have given page numbers where he is talking about it. Clinical psychologists think that emotional mind is far quicker than rational mind. Its quickness precludes the deliberate analytic reflection that is hallmark of thinking mind. We think, evaluate, look for pro and cons, benefit and loss, and that we make a decision. But emotional decisions are not based on that long list of checking everything. Actions that spring from the emotional mind carry a particularly strong sense of certainty. Rational analysis may lead or may not lead to a final judgment, but emotional mind quite often quickens and creates a better sense of certitude. You don't have to make a checklist when you see a person, a stranger, rushing towards you. You don't rationally try to analyze, but your quicker mind tells you he is about to attack you. So before he approaches you, you punch him. This emotional decision precedes your rational analysis of a situation. That's what Goldman is telling us here. And then after you have done it, you say, why did I do it? It's normal situation in our everyday life. The emotional mind can read an emotional reality. Again, this is psychological language. Emotional reality means what you feel emotionally at a given point. Does not mean absolute reality. In an instant, making the intuitive snap judgments. You make judgments quickly. Emotional mind is our radar for danger. You don't always judge danger with rational analysis, but emotionally you judge it. It's what's going to take place. If we wait for rational mind to make some of these judgments, we might not only be wrong, we might be dead. The drawback is that these impressions and intuitive judgments, because they are made in the snap of a finger, may be mistaken or misguided. So you don't have a justification, rational basis for making a judgment, but quite often it is just in the shortest possible time. Then he says it takes rational mind a moment or two longer to register and respond than it does with the emotional mind. The first impulse in an emotional situation is the heart's, not the head's. All empirical sciences deal with mind and biological brain. They never talk about heart. Even the whole enterprise of psychology is a matter of mind and not of heart. But Goldman, a clinical psychologist, is giving an idea that it's not just your mind and brain that works, but there are emotions as well. And when we use the word mind and heart, automatically those who have studied anatomy and biology and physiology, they say that when we analyze a brain, then we have a long connecting system of nerves. We have membranes, we have curves, we have lobes that have different functions, and all that is is done by us clinically. So you have electronic devices that ultimately tell you which lobe of mind brain is working, which is not working. We call it EEG, and that tells you very clearly in a graph form how different parts of brain are working. All these aspects relate with physical or mental activity. Nowhere you have an EEG done on your heart. Therefore, the concept here is very much different. So he is saying that it takes a longer time when we are using our brain, but emotional decisions take much faster speed. So he says we cannot choose the emotions which we have. Love is like a fever that comes and goes independently of the will. Rational mind usually does not decide what emotions we should have. You don't decide what should you like. You see a person who in your view is a tall, handsome person, you call him a better political leader than someone else, without going into his background, education, upbringing, experience. None of those aspects are done by rational mind, but it's just an emotional judgment. And quite often a whole nation can make an emotional judgment, later on may say why we did it. The brain registers emotional memories through neurochemical altering systems that prime the body to react to life-threatening emergencies by fighting or fleeing. Again, being an empirical psychologist, he has to find out what is biological factor in a psychological action. So he is telling us that there are certain neurochemical alterings that lead to it. Further, under stress and anxiety or intense excitement, a nerve running from the brain to the adrenal glands atop the kidney triggers a section of the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine, which surges throughout the body, priming it for an emergency. Glands that produce adrenaline and that quite often lead you to various clinical situations are linked here with our emotional judgment, that certain chemicals are released due to which you blush, chemicals are released due to which you start shivering, certain portions shrink because of that, having all these things. So the whole clinical psychology, because it's based on empirical paradigm, will try to find out what are the causes either in the physical phenomena or in mental phenomena. Here he is trying to tell us that there are certain activities going on in our body, but at the same time these hormones are not directly linked with brain but something else. These hormones activate receptors on the vagus nerve which carries signals back into the brain. The amygdala is the main site in the brain where those signals go. They activate neurons within the amygdala to signal other brain regions to strengthen the memory of what is happening. The more intense the amygdala arousal, the stronger the imprint in emotional memory. The amygdala can trigger an emotional response, and automatically the emotional system can act independently of neocortex. This is very interesting. He is telling us that there are two systems working in our body and are parallel to each other. One is what is controlled by this neocortex, other is somewhere in the middle of the head, which is amygdala. Right here you see in the diagram, and this amygdala is not bigger than an almond, but that almond amygdala quite often processes everything without all that so many meters long brain cells. Your brain, if you spread it, occupies a long space. Amygdala is just a lump like an almond, and yet he is telling us it's amygdala that triggers all these things, and neocortex remains very much helpless in that situation. So ultimately he is telling us that there is a battle going on between heart and head, neocortex and amygdala. Some responses, very interesting, to perception taking only 12,000 of a second. We think a second is very small unit, But what is telling us that some decisions are made in 1/12,000 of a second, not by our thinking brain, thinking mind, but by the small object known as amygdala. The point now is, in which our management science gurus always take a lead, and that is proper management of emotional intelligence helps in making proper judgments. They recognize its presence. All they are saying is, if you properly manage, so the word manage is repeated everywhere. Anger management, emotional management, financial management, political management, water management. You think of any area and the gurus of management science enter and say, this is our domain. So here also you find Goldman telling us that you have to learn how to manage your emotions, then you can make a better judgment. In the empirical psychological paradigm, judgments are subject to pathological analysis of emotions. The point you want to share with you is, we are dealing with ethics and morality, which helps us in making judgment. Emotions also help in that. But Goldman's philosophy is that your emotional judgments are linked directly with your pathological situation. Therefore, if we can have a chemical injected and create a situation where you should normally feel angry, that chemical can help you not becoming angry. This is management of your emotions by chemical intervention, which means everything is empirically controllable. And that is the core of Western thought, philosophy and development. Everything is based on empirical paradigm. Ethical intelligence holistically responds and directs human conduct. This is my own term. I use it, ethical intelligence, in response to what he has done. We have referred to it earlier, if some of you were here, but this diagram simply elaborates where do empirical models stand. The empiricist paradigm of values is based essentially on empirical reality of local customs. So, local customs lead to social constructs, social behavior, socially acceptable things. We call them social construct. Why should you stand up for your parents, for your teacher, for someone you think has more knowledge? Not because of personal worship, but because of knowledge. If this is a social norm, you observe it. But there can be a society where whoever comes makes no difference. And therefore, the so-called modern society has no such concept. A child is not supposed to call his father, my dear father, respectable parents, but hey guys, or hey old fellows. Social construct. Because that's what this child is taught by the Cartoon Network. That's what taught by his peer group. So this child does not differentiate between parents and his own peer group. Uses same language, which indicates the poverty of culture, how poor the culture is. Culture means levels of intelligence and existence, not just a flat rate of everything. So this paradigm, this diagram explains to you how the whole analysis in psychology, whole analysis in economics, political science, management science, you think of any area, all that is done based on this simple diagram. It is your market mechanism, your market trend that determines what kind of products I bring, more or less. All those are based on empirical evidence. Islamic ethics and morality does not trace its origin in any given society. Therefore, Islamic values cannot be confined or limited to a single place known as Makkah or Medina. These are not product of these cities, but these are values which changed these cities and made them respectable cities for us. Divine values, which are universal, we have talked about them earlier. These divine values, which are universal, which do not belong to only Muslims or do not have a close club approach, but these values are universal. And these values determine social behavior. It's not the social constructs tell you how to behave, but these values tell you how to make social constructs. It's complete reversal of the so-called empirical paradigm of knowledge. So when these values are understood, then automatically we find that rational and emotional intelligence both have to be subservient to a third factor. Nevertheless, Islam does not disregard role of reason. So the Quran refers to use of aql. We have sent it down as an Arabic Quran in order that you may learn wisdom. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And elsewhere, again the taqilun is translated as that you may understand, or you may use your reason to understand it. Then it also tells us that you have to use your capabilities for investigation. Your research should be evidence based. You must go into analysis. Again, it is the domain of brain and domain of mind and intellect. The Quran invites people to use their thinking capacity and find out how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the cycle of day and night. If there was only day or only night, how human body will respond? If you are not allowed to sleep at all for 3 days, how would you behave? Or if you are put to sleep for 1 whole month, when you wake up, how will you behave? Therefore, in the alternation of day and night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put something for us to think. Why? And its impact on us. And is it just a matter of trial and error that by chance sun and moon had a discussion and agreed, I'll come in the morning, you come in the evening? Or there is someone who has made this decision in the form of a law, and that law is not changed for millions of years, but it has helped human beings in living a normal life. It further emphasizing on rationalization. So the Quran talks about tatafakkarun, yatafakkarun, and so on and so forth. You have these references and then tells us then ask them, are blind and seeing alike, do you then reflect? Those who are blinded consciously or unconsciously, who are not prepared to listen to anything, are they equal to those who listen? Again, it talks about ta'aqqul, that you have to use your reason as much as possible. The word used, tadabbur, again refers to pondering. So it invites neocortex to be used as much as possible. Again, in-depth research in deductive and inductive understanding of a phenomenon. And then trying to remind ourselves based on historical evidence. So the Quran tells us that there are people who by themselves think when they are sitting, standing or reclining. At the same time, it tells us that you have to learn from the available historical records. Now, having said that about rational approach, the Quran does not abandon or leave the domain of heart, which has been, after long period of trial and error, discovered by psychologists later on. Goldman mentions about role of heart, but I am not aware of any other psychologist before him who is focusing on heart as he has done. So, heart allegorically is considered center of emotions. आप कहते हैं मेरा दिल नहीं चाह रहा या दिल चाह रहा है, क्यों कहते हैं? What's the basis? Language is not a matter of your own choice. It's a culture. It represents your feelings, your faith and everything. So when you say that it's my feeling, heart is not prepared, then there has to be something behind it. So the Quran tells us that there is heart which has a function, and quite often your heart may have a feeling of terror, frighteningness or pleasure and enjoyment. It tells us that heart is seat of kindness. Your rational mind tells you that this person was very unfair to you and gave you a C grade instead of A grade. But then you find the same person in front of you slipping on the floor and falling down. Your rational mind will say, let him suffer. He gave me C, let him now face this situation. But what will your emotional mind tell you? If you are a kind person, you cannot see this person slip and get hurt. Therefore, the Quran tells us that if Prophet was not kind and merciful and gentle, then people would have run away from him. Heart a seat of consolation. So it tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows inner peace, sakina, sukoon in the heart. I am sure if you have a child, your own child or a grandchild, and they just come towards you with their arms open and try to hug you, you cannot pay that feeling by 10 million rupees or by a toy given to the person as gift. It's not measurable. That is what the Quran talks about, sakina, that it is in the heart. You cannot just measure it empirically. So similarly, the heart is also a place where you might have a root of split personality. So there are hearts which are full of hypocrisy, but people appear. The Quran calls it a disease, nifaq, as a disease in the heart of people. And Allah intensifies that. Hardening of hearts is also mentioned in the Quran, that there are some hearts which become more strong than a stone, and then compares and tells us that even some stones break and water gushes out of them, but these hearts that become like a stone have no feelings, have no compassion, have no understanding, and so on and so forth. The Quran also talks about sealing of hearts, that sometimes people act in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately seals their hearts. Now they cannot anymore differentiate between right and wrong. A hadith tells us that if you do something wrong, it may be very small, and don't take care of it and don't remove it by doing good, then it remains a small dot on your heart. And then if you do the same thing again, this dot increases till it envelops your heart. And once it envelops your heart, then you lose completely sense of proportion. Then for you it makes no difference whether something is good or bad. Similarly, the Quran also talks about hearts as a seat of pondering. Do they then not reflect on the Quran, or are there locks on their hearts? Having covered these two aspects, we find that Quran has joined both aspects together in various places. One is in front of you, where you find it said, and certainly we have created for hell men and jinn and mankind. They have hearts with which they fail to understand or reason out, and they have eyes with which they fail to see, and they have ears with which they fail to hear. They are like cattle, indeed even more astray, such are utterly heedless. Here you find empirical sources and non-empirical contemplative aspect, as well as emotions, all are put together in one single ayah. That your hearts and your reason, they have to act in a synergized manner. So what we call ethical intelligence is essentially a combination of those Quranic messages that relate with our intellection and reflection. Intellection by intellect, reflection by heart. When these two are put together and both are brought under one single command, then there is emergence of ethical intelligence. The state of human mind and heart is often non-static and dynamic. Human conscience, which is an ethical category, works as a censor for all human actions, since essential nature of human being is good. The Quran tells us that essentially we have made you in a good constitution, in a good proportion, in a good shape, in a very well-meaning personality. But at the same time, we have allowed you to continue in that state of purity, or have your whole existence corrupted, physically, intellectually, and culturally. Therefore, the Quranic dictum is that surely we created man in best mold. Now, what is this conscience and how it works? Again, the Quran helps us in that and tells us that there is a phenomena known as nafs lawwama. that warns a person when one is inclined to commit something wrong. In Hadith, Prophet peace be upon him mentions that the heart of a believer is like a mufti. In other words, one does not have to ask an expert in fiqh on stealing or backbiting or being good or bad. The heart, so long as it's not polluted, always speaks truth. Should I steal it? Should I hate it? Should I hide it? Everything can be decided if there is purity. You don't have to go on net and find a virtual mufti giving you fatwa on everything. You can ask your own self. So this inner self, nafs lawama, is that. Another dimension is that of nafs ammara, which inclines human beings to something wrong and charms a person, which is essentially the act or area or domain of shaitan. The person is always attracted by those things, and ultimately when this conscience with continuous control of nafs ammara becomes dead, then no evil is conceived as evil by a person. Thirdly, the Quran also informs us about human beings gifted with conscience or self, which is by constitution in an inner mufti. It checks and judges the human actions before an action takes place. The fully satisfied and convinced mind and heart is called nafs mutmainna. This nafs combines both intellectual and emotional, mind and heart together, and both tell us how should we act. Therefore, when a person takes out everything from his home and offers to people who are needy, then he does not have feeling of emptiness. He has no feeling of how will I survive. He has no feeling of losing property, but has a feeling of gaining, satisfaction, inner pleasure. When this occupies his personality, then you don't have emotional intelligence dominating, nor just neocortex or rational judgments made. Ethical intelligence or human conscience persuades a person to act ethically under divine guidance and consciously avoid what is haram and prohibited, and excel in doing good or maroof in all walks of life. We have used these terms earlier when we talked about universal Islamic values, but now we are using them again in order to synthesize what we have been saying earlier, that Islamic approach is maroof should prevail, which is ethical good. And this ethical good is more stronger and more quicker than emotional intelligence. It filters human actions, and therefore not everything is just rational or just emotional, but ethics has to precede both these phenomena, which are in focus by our psychologists, legal thinkers, social scientists. To conclude, Islam visualizes human being as a responsible person. For that, the term used is Ameen. A person who is Ameen means he is responsible of the trust. He knows what to do and what not to do. Therefore, the concept of man in Islam is a person who is Amin. At the same time, it emphasizes on the rational behavior of human beings coupled with ethical conduct. Therefore, from beginning to end, the Quran talks about those who are muttaqeen. Taqwa is not, as I said earlier, a matter of dress and appearance, but taqwa is a matter of attitude and behavior. Unless the behavior and attitude is fully transformed, it is not observing taqwa. You may excuse me, cover yourself fully as required by Islam, but if every word you use is harsh, every statement you make is insulting, then your beautiful appearance has make no difference. Taqwa means that behavior and attitude which is based on Allah consciousness. And therefore, all his actions are to be rationally pre-qualified in the light of universal Islamic values of Tawheed, Adl, Maroof, Bir, Khair, Taqwa, Halal, Ihsan, Tawazun, Haq and Faraid. We have touched on some of these, but these values are extremely important, and particularly the value at the top is Tawheed. If you recall a simple diagram I showed you earlier, where we had Tawheed and then Adl and so on and so forth. And that tells you that at every moment a person has to examine oneself. Do I believe in Tawheed? If I am giving less marks to a person who deserves more. Do I believe in Tawheed when I am trying to purchase a dress which is extremely costly, but the purpose is in wedding everyone should look at me and say, what a wonderful dress. When you are trying to invite people for food and you make a lavish dinner, so people will say they've never had such a dinner before. Whatever is being done, is this according to Tawheed right or wrong? And similarly, Adl, no less important. Is it Adl to have 15 dishes when you can honor a guest with 2 or 3 dishes? And same for Maroof, for what is known globally as good. I am not aware of any society where you will find that whether a bird, a kangaroo or anyone will think that the baby kangaroo in the pocket of a kangaroo when grows should slap this big kangaroo. Hit? No. I am not aware of it. Although kangaroos are known for hitting each other psychologically. But a baby never hits a mother kangaroo or father kangaroo. Universal value. So Maroof means that universal value which is known to us. We have discussed earlier about Bir when we talked about Ayatul Bir from Al-Baqarah. So 177 ayah of Al-Baqarah that tells you Bir is not that you face toward east or west, but Bir is that you have your faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Prophet, in books, in life after death, in angels. And having said that, it again says that that's not enough, but you must help the needy, feed the needy, try to observe your prayers regularly. And then ultimately it tells us these are the persons who are muttaqi. Bir and taqwa are used at the beginning and end of this ayah to tell us that they are both nearly same. So this is what tells us how to act. And then khair, what is better or good, what is halal, what is permissible, what is ethically good, and haram, what is ethically wrong. I have earlier explained that Muslims usually associate halal and haram with only slaughtered meat, but not with their vision, not with their audition, not what they listen, not what they see, not what they talk, not how they behave, not how they have feelings for other people. Is it a halal feeling or haram feeling? We never use that measure to judge our feelings. While when we understand the meaning of ethical intelligence, then this ethical intelligence is materialized or implemented with the help of these various Quranic terms. Similarly, ihsan, doing things in their most perfect manner, and tawazun, which means balance, moderation, and not to exceed, and haqq, what is the right. You can easily judge a people as a nation by just observing their mannerism in driving. If you have reached a roundabout and you know that haqq or right is of the person who is at your right hand, but you keep on moving your vehicle till you block the way, and others following you besides you block completely. So you have an ocean of cars where you have a roundabout. All 4 roads are fully blocked with 4 rows. That tells you what they understand of right, haqq, whose right is to come first. And same when you have a convocation, then a person who was having less attendance but got 3.95 or 96 CGPA writes a letter, I must get gold because my CGPA is so. But that's not the only criteria, other things as well. Right, my right, I should get, is always in the mind. The whole concept of so-called empowerment, it's my right, as you have just recently seen in social media, the right of husband and right of wife. Why should I make the bed? Why should I leave bed as it is? Why should I do laundry? Why should I take care of my child? Why shouldn't I send every month a bill? I'm feeding your child, pay me that much. It's my right. There is no end to this battle. Therefore, the Quran and Sunnah have provided a substitute attitude in life, and that is of sila rahmi. Instead of a fight for rights, a cooperation, a collaboration, a respectful relationship of what in Surah Ar-Rum it calls mawadda wa rahma. But unfortunately, in our society, sorry for this bad throat, in our society we have never been able to understand how Islam has given values that change our behavior. And these values come before the so-called neocortex rational or the so-called heart decision. What is ethical? Is it ethical that a person has lived with his wife, they start quarreling every day, every night, till ultimately both think no more going. So they say, let's have talaq, divorce. But the lady is expecting, and the husband says, since talaq has been implemented, to hell with you. Leave this home, leave all your belongings, even whatever I gave you as jewelry, as gift, perfumes, dresses, everything, just leave. The battle of rights, battle of so-called equality, lack of knowledge, lack of humanity. The Quran tells very clearly, in such matters, even when you are doing talaq, live with Maroof and do talaq with Maroof. Both places the word is used, Maroof, virtue, good. Live with Maroof, ashruhunna bil Maroof, and wasarruhunna bil Maroof, and leave them with Maroof. Not this battle of what belongs to me, what belongs to you. The Quran says, if you have given them a heap qintar, let them take it. Don't take anything. Is this a battle of genders, of equality, empowerment, or ethics precedes everything? Therefore, unless ethical intelligence is inculcated, ingrained, made part of blood and breathing, we remain slave to either so-called rational or so-called emotional approaches, and both are nowadays accepted by psychologists as legitimate ways of acting. But Islam goes ahead of that and tells us, don't act just rationally or just emotionally, but you have to act ethically. Your ethics must prevail everything. What is ethics of speech, ethics of dress, ethics of walking? It does not leave it unmentioned. So the Quran says, when you are walking, don't walk the walk of pride, but walk with humbleness. When you talk, don't brag. Worst of the voice is that of an ass, a donkey. When you are eating, eat with moderation. When you are doing your ibadah, don't stay awake whole night, but moderate. Everything conceivable is measured on ethical standards. That's why ethics plays foundational role, and that's why we have tried from day one to even write down in the mission statement that we want Islamic ethical values not Western values, not Eastern values, not secular ethics, but Islamic ethics to be inculcated. And that cannot be done unless our teachers themselves absorb it, understand it, digest it, and then act in view of that digested behavior. So, human mind and heart are to be synergized and guided by universal ethical principles and not by purely emotional, biological, and psychological responses. Ethical intelligence pre-qualifies an action and guides in making on the spot responsible judgment. Ilm, hikmah, and qalb work together in accepting or rejecting a desired action. So, we mentioned earlier nafs lawama, nafs ammara, and nafs mutmainna, and that leads to an ethically satisfied state of mind. That takes care of our today's discussion.